Well, hello, it's Henry here again, and this is an installment of what happened in my RVing world during 2018, kind of a summary, as I did last year. And so, fittingly, I'm here in the sea breeze and give that update. So first off, we still have jobs. We still work for a living. I'm a physics teacher, and my wife works in an accounting financial company. And so I get the summers, which does help a little bit for RVing, and she gets maybe 3 weeks, and we try to fit away time as best we can. In addition, I've got a way now to park the RV in the driveway for a few days here and there, although I'm not supposed to. And have it fairly level. Most driveways have an angle to them, and so this makes it, a bit harder. But I've been able to do it now, so it works out pretty well. And so I spent so last night, I guess, 18 days this year in the driveway, one time or another, and it's sort of been away. Sometimes we do it between trips. If I'm coming back from something and going to the next one, and we're only home for a day or two, it's easier just to stay in the driveway than it is to move everything into the house and all that kind of thing. And then we had 20 nights paid somewhere. Now that cost us about $1,200, so $60 a night, Canadian money, of course. And I'll get back to that when I get to the trips. But out of the 60 nights, only 20 were paid for. So, been driveway camping primarily. I'd love to do boondocking, and we'll see about that next year a bit. But here in Ontario, the opportunities for camping, especially with a half-decent sized RV, are limited. And then about 25 nights we stayed with family in their driveways, here, there, and the other place, all over primarily southern Ontario and Sault Ste. Marie, and certainly enjoyed doing that as well. So that's sort of been the activity, but 2 months out of the whole year, to me, especially when you're still working, is very exciting to be able to pull that off. My YouTube channel, I started to tell people, that my friends and family, about it, and so I've had certainly an increase in activity and interest, which is very nice to see. I'm over a total of 1,000 views now, which is, I know nothing for the YouTube stars out there, but given that I had barely 100 views before, it's coming along. So hopefully, as I keep doing this, maybe some people find it interesting to see what we do here. I made a number of improvements in the actual RV itself and how it works and so on. And I like to tinker that way, and I have to probably cut it back because it probably costs too much money and some things aren't necessary. And I know I often think about it and say, gee, well, should I do this or not, or no, and so forth. and reject some things because they're probably not worth doing. But some things are worth doing, and they're fun. And so it's kind of neat to see. So this year, the first thing I did was the fridge relay. Well, first thing to mention here, I didn't do it first probably, but so as I mentioned in a video out there on my video list, was that I had the relay set up so I could take the power my two-way fridge from the battery while I'm driving. So it's not a 12-volt capable fridge, but I powered off the inverter, and I have a switching system that will allow it to do that so that I can control that from the driver area when I'm going down the road. However, those relays are mechanical, and they chatter when you're driving because of the vibration of the RV, and this was causing them to fail. So I had to switch to solid-state relays, and so I did that change in the summer sometime. It's working great. So the project that's kind of came out at the end of the year here, the generator in this particular RV is a Generac Q55. Now that may have been a fine generator, but whether it wasn't maintained well or just what the arithmetic is, it's just had it. And most of the gray hairs in my head are due to that thing. It's the one aspect of this RV that's been a real headache since I bought it. So I've given up on it. And what we decided to do instead, we looked at different things. One was to rip it out, and you could do the usual rip it out, put an Onan in there, and $6,500 to $7,000 later. And I just didn't see doing that in an old RV that whenever we retire, we'll probably trade and get something else. And so that's going to go with it. And that just seemed to me to be ridiculous. So then we looked at other ones, a portable generator type thing, and installing it in the hole, but I just didn't think, based on the measurements I had and all the rest of it, whether that, and then you have to build it up and would it get too hot in there, and a host of other ideas. So I decided to move away from that. And so then the idea I got was to get a 2,000 watt generator we just carry in the vehicle, and when we get somewhere we can turn it on and it'll run almost everything. The only thing it won't run, of course, is roof air. But the roof air is what you kind of want when you're going down in the summertime in the States or whatever. The RV gets pretty warm. And so I, you know, it was kind of a compromise that was not really my favorite choice. And then I bought something off of Walmart or whatever online, and while I was paying for it, this thing popped up that this generator, the 3,000 watt version, was now available for at 2/3 off, or 1/3 off, pardon me, basically the same price as a 2,000 watt generator. So I bought it. So this is a 3,000 watt Furman generator, and then I went and bought one of those rear carrier things, but I wanted one that had a bicycle mount on it. And so this allows for the bicycle mount to be there when you're carrying. So if I'm pulling the Jeep, then it goes on the back of the Jeep. If I'm just going with the RV, then it goes on the back of the RV, if we need the generator. So we have different modes of what we're doing depending on the time of year and what makes sense and what we need. And so it's pretty cool. Got it running. I would say that it's as advertised. It starts really well. In a contained area like the garage around with it, you know, it seems kind of loud, but I think that's probably because the sound system is designed for an open area. We think if we're boondocking, we're probably going to have to still put some soundproofing further to quiet it down enough that neighbors won't know we're using it. So what I've decided to do, although I haven't made any effort to do it yet, is to build some kind of a box that goes on top of the pan that will not only protect it from the weather, but also quiet it down. So that means we can run the generator when we're driving in a rainy day, for example, which we can't do right now, and or run the generator when we're somewhere and we don't want to have problems with our neighbors and so on. So that's sort of the arithmetic on that one. So that's, stay tuned, and as I develop that, we'll make some videos along those lines. I got a small Wi-Fi booster here for the RV. I don't know how that will go, but we'll see if it makes a difference in some of the kind of sketchier Wi-Fi situations we find ourselves in. And so that, you know, that's been something that's been a little bit of an interest, and it was only $20, so we'll see what happens. A lot of these Wi-Fi boosters that most of the RVers are putting in to pull Wi-Fi's from a long distance, we may do that down the road, but we're not doing that yet. So in another video, I talked about how I put in a second power supply for the RV. If you're in a driveway and you're getting your 15 amps off of the main plug, sometimes you need more power for that. Let's say you want an additional heater, or when you're cooking, you want to run, you know, I don't know, some appliance in addition to what else you're running, and you don't have enough juice. So this allows for a second isolated power supply system that's a 15 amp roughly, that would plug into a different plug here in the RV that would allow for that to happen, and that's located not too far from the kitchen here. And so that went in really well, and it tested just fine. So when we do this in the future, that will be available to us. And the nice part is if you go to a park or something and it's a 30 amp service, there's always a 15 amp plug as well. And so you can get both supplies from what you're paying for. So that's kind of cool too, because again, if you're running 30 and you're running your air conditioners and this and that and the other, you may want a little more juice. And since you're paying for it, you might as well take it. This is the plug, business end of the plug, if you will, inside the RV. The switch on the left side will engage the power, and the right side, of course, gives you two outlets to plug in whatever it is you want to add to the system. So I'm pretty satisfied and think it's going to work great. If you are more interested in how the system goes together, there's one of the videos on my site, that on my YouTube channel, that will show you the details. We had so far only twice, knock on knock on wood here, at my mechanic. Sometimes we get the odd mouse in the RV. If it stays there for a while, there's not sure why, but anyhow. And we were at a campground one time where I think we left the door open, so let's let that one aside. So it seems somehow they get into the subfloor, and the subfloor in this particular RV is fairly robustly made, and the tanks are in the subfloor, and there's heating that blows down into the subfloor to keep the tanks warm if you run the furnace. So that's cool, or warm, and that's all three, the two gray tanks and the black tank are all in this area, so that's really quite nice. But anyhow, they get in that way, and then from there they get into the RV. There are open cuts in different places where hoses and whatever get up here into the house area. Through the furnace vents as well. They can climb back up through those and so on. So last Victoria Day weekend, May 2-4 weekend here in Ontario, I had the RV apart pretty good, and we found all those, as much as we could, and we screened them off with metal and really blocked up every conceivable area that we could find where they might make an entrance. And hopefully, knock on wood, it's been okay since then, so we're grateful for that, and just hate that. And so we're hoping to, and we're also sanitizing the RV, so when we store it, there's never any food in it, of course, but we take all our knives and forks and pots and pans and we put them in a closet that they would not have access to anyway, so that if something does get in, other than cleaning out that particular drawer, you don't have anything to worry about. So, but we hope that we're finished with that anyway, because it's a real pain in the neck. I showed a short video last year of my airspeed meter in the vehicle. I bought an airspeed indicator meant for an ultralight airplane. I mounted on my dash, and then it goes, the hose goes through the firewall out to the front of the RV, where the ram air will change the differential pressure and give you a effective airspeed. And it works pretty well, I must say. And it tells you, you can see if the wind is pushing you in the nose, that your airspeed is higher than your ground speed is, and if a following one, you see that, you see the compression wave when a truck passes you, which is 30 or 40 kilometers an hour faster than you're driving. So it's just something else that's interesting, and I will include a video in this section just to show it in operation. Here's the airspeed indicator in operation. We're going down the highway right now. We're traveling about 92, 93 kilometers an hour, and the airspeed is more like 97, 98, 99. So it's indicative at least of a small headwind on average. And it does chatter a little bit, but it still gives you a pretty idea what's going on. And been very consistent. You get the odd time you get something in the hose, you just blow it out with the compressor. It works pretty well. So I'm really pleased with it. So it's a total nerd thing, but it's fun. My what I call my PSP, so it's basically just a status panel that I have up at the front that helps me remember how we're doing with the different systems, so we don't forget things, we don't break things. Things will break in an RV, you know, we have to kind of accept that, but I don't want to be the reason it breaks. I want to operate it properly, and then we'll see. So what I'm going to do now here is I'll put a picture up, and I'll narrate to the picture of the panel so you can see what I do and how it works. It's very, very cheap to put together, but it actually is very effective at peace of mind when I'm driving. This panel has 20 gauges on it. Now what happens is the back of it is made on a Word document with graphics and so forth, and I used you use whichever font you find. I think this contrast works very well. And then I have a backing of this. This is made out of plywood. It's mounted near where I drive. And then what I do is I get black coated thumbtacks, and I cut the needles out of Bristol board so they're fairly stiff. And then you put the thumbtack into the board, maybe just tap it with a hammer. And this gives you a chance to position it any way you want to. And you can see here there's the awning, there's water, there's the feed water source, there's the tow situation, there's all this kind of stuff. And way down in the lower right corner, there's the one where it's what I call clear to start, which means, so is my tow system okay? Have I done a perimeter check? Is the fridge working? Okay, is my driver checklist complete? And then I'm clear to start. And so this is a way I'm hoping to better understand if the RV is ready to go or not, so that I'm not maybe moving too quickly and making a mistake. It's going to cost me some money or frustration. This one has much more detail than the last one did. I'm going to wait and see. I may reorganize the positioning of these gauges and a couple of other things, but in general, I really like how it went. And I mean, what does it cost? Well, I don't know, maybe less than $1 for the print. You have to make sure you print 1-to-1 when you do this, because a lot of printers will make it slightly smaller. Thumbtacks aren't very expensive, and of course the Bristol board, and so it's just a bit of time. But I mean, this is really nice to have as you go down the road. It's a very easy type system to use. And now I'm going to show the second panel I have, which is meant more for consumable levels. So I'm going to flip and put that one up. Smaller panels to the right of the one you just saw, and it is just simply a record of the consumables. So for example, you might notice you check your tanks and so on before, but you'll forget. So this is a way to have a record that's visible to the driver, so you remind yourself, oh gee, I have to go do this or that or something else. And so the first one is leg, which I generally use for the number of days in a trip. The second one is how much money we've spent on a trip so far. And then we have the different water. We have potable water, we have fresh water. We don't drink out of our tops very much, so we bring water that way. We have our gray 1 and gray 2 tanks, we have our black water tank, and we have our propane tank. And so these little, again, you just simply design this on a computer, and then print it on cardstock, thumbtack it on, and then the center of the dials is just a black thumbtack with construction paper, Bristol board, and you position it as appropriate. And you just simply tap the tack in if you need a little more tension, and it works really well. The only thing I would do with this one differently is I'd make the dials green and the numbers yellow. The contrast is so much better. It's pretty hard to read them. So if I do this again, I'll certainly do that. But for now, it works pretty well. And so there's the other half of the PSP. Okay, and then I put a new inverter in. This is an Ames inverter. It's a 600 watt inverter, got it off of Walmart for 200 Canadian, which was pretty reasonable. And it's just wonderful. It just works like a charm. It doesn't cut out until down to 10.5 volts and all that. So it's just been grand. I have, for example, in the foot box where I drive the RV, there is no heat in this particular RV. The way they configured it, I don't know why. I mean, it's built in California or whatever, but there's heat on the passenger side, but there's no heat that I can find that vents to the foot box for the driver. And if you drive this in the winter, it gets kind of cold, and I find my feet getting very cold. So I found a little ceramic heater, 250 watt ceramic heater, and so when I drive I can run the cord for that around behind and stick it in the inverter and turn that on, and it warms up my feet beautifully. Of course we're running the fridge off the inverter as well, so we're getting up into the limit of the inverter there pretty close. So what we might do on that case, if we're going in the winter time, is recognize that the fridge is not going to be threatened too much because the outside temperatures are pretty hot, pretty cold. We might not bother with the fridge under those conditions. But we'll just have to see how it works out. But hopefully we'd be able to run, if we had to, we can put the the heater on the lower range, which would also help a little bit. We also know that the fridge will come on and off a bit based on its temperature. It may not be running all the time, but you're getting awful close to the inverter going on to overload. So I don't know if I want to see how far that goes and so forth. We put we had some different layers on the mattress in the back. I always find I like a softer top bed for sleeping purposes, and you get to be a little older, aches and pains. But anyhow, we had a number of layers on there, and so last spring I took all that off, and we simply put the 3-inch thick memory foam, thermal memory foam on the bed, and it works great. And it still makes the bed a reasonable height and all the rest of it. So I've really been enjoying that. It's actually pretty funny if you get into the RV when it's very cold and you go sit on the bed, it's like sitting on a brick. But as soon as the bed warms up, it works very well. So, but that's been kind of nice. And finally, we trying to find ways, if we're going away for 2 or 3 days or less, and if it takes, say, 5 or 6 hours to get the RV on the road, well, you just don't want to do it. It's too much work. And so the idea was to modularize something so that when we go on the road, it's easy to manage. So what I did was, there's a closet in the back it accepts these white containers. And I think I have 4 of those. And so in those containers we have my basic toiletries and so forth. And so that's what I use in the home too. So when we go camping, we just put those containers in a larger carrier, bring them out to the RV and stick them in the RV. Same thing with the clothes. I have a container that has some of my clothes, and it goes very quickly, which allows for allows for very quick to move in from those types of things. The same thing with the other drawers. We've went to the store and found some baskets that fit right in the drawers, and that works really nicely. And so we use those things, and that's been really good. So the only challenge that's probably not beatable just now is the food, in that you need certain foods with you, and they're in the fridge at home or wherever, and you've got to stick them where they got to go. Some need to be in the fridge, some not, and this kind of thing. So that's still a bit of a challenge, but half the job's done in the sense of the clothing, the tools, my outdoors stuff. I have a tub for canoeing and hiking and biking and so forth, and that could just go in the RV, and then you just hang it on the back, and off you go. So there's, I've always said, like, to be able to drop our hat from a drop of a hat and we're gone in an hour. That might be optimistic, but 2 hours would be great. We always try to leave the RV fueled with propane and gas when it goes to storage, so that if we do need it, that's not a problem. And then we can, because you're going away on a Friday night and there's traffic and whatever, and now you have to wait and mess around with fueling when you could have done it at your pleasure on some Saturday, Sunday, whenever you're taking the RV back from maintenance or something like that. So that's been the logistics of those types of things are actually really cool. I really quite find it interesting. I showed it in my Emily Park video. I went to school. I had the Jeep and the Jeep and the bike and the canoe and the RV and the whole works. So that morning I left for school. I had the canoe on the roof. I had the bike attached. I had the whole thing. And then I went to the RV and I turned on the refrigerator using gas. And then I went to work. And on the way back, I went and I got something to eat. I went to the food store and bought the basics for the food for the next couple days. And then I went to the RV. And because then the fridge is cold, you can put it in. And I just pull the RV ahead and connect the Jeep to it. Now, it took me 50 minutes, I think, to turn it around, which was longer than I'd hoped, and I forget exactly. I think I was probably doing some video and stuff. And then I just went out to Emily Park, which was like an hour and a half or whatever from there. And you get in there and set up. So it was not too bad. And I'm looking forward to doing something like that again. That was a fun way to do things. So finally, in my report, one other thing that came up abreast that I noticed on the internet, and I have to mention it, I don't know just exactly what strategy I'm going to use yet, but there's this issue when you're going down the road with your license plate being covered by bicycles or whatever you're carrying on the back of the vehicle. And you can get cited for that if the police choose to do so. So I'm told it's not a problem if you're towing a vehicle, like a transport truck kind of thing. So if you're towing your car, that's okay. But the license plate at the back of the vehicle must be visible. And it must also be mounted to the vehicle. It cannot be hung on a rope or something like that. So I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do, because the Jeep plate will be covered by the bike anyway, and certainly if I use the bike cover, it will be covered, because that's completely opaque. So I have to think about whether I can have another location when I'm traveling where I could mount the license plate higher up, maybe off of the struts that hold the canoe or something. And that's sort of what I'm thinking right now. But I have to go with something that's, fairly easy to install. It's not going to take me half an hour to move it, and just hopefully that would work without difficulty. So we'll just have to see how that evolves. And finally, the trips that I did this year. So we went up to visit family in Sault Ste. Marie twice, and it's a wonderful drive. It's 660 kilometers, so it's a day. We do it. This vehicle can do that trip nonstop, but generally that's a long time to run anyway, one way or the other. So sometimes we'll stop around Espanola or something like that to take on fuel. This year I'm going to be looking at different ways for economy purposes to be more insightful about which fuel stations are cheaper, and also running lighter with less in the tanks and so on, and just try to save $1 or $2 that way, especially with a longer drive like that. And but anyhow, I really enjoy that trip. Those of you who have not been to Ontario, you get a little bit north of Barrie, you get into the Canadian Shield and the rocks and the trees. Is actually very pretty for hundreds of kilometers. So beautiful drives through there. And then, as I've been chronicling around Lake Erie, my sister and I did a trip where we started in Detroit, to Dearborn, and we went around through Fremont and so on, down to the eastern Ohio, and across to Harper's Ferry, and up into southern Pennsylvania. It was a very nice trip. Saw lots of very interesting things. I'm finding, and of course when you go with someone, you split the cost, which is great. The problem for Canadians, at least at this time of year, is when you go to the States, of course, with the dollar being the way it is, the campgrounds are pretty expensive. Even a $20 a night US campground costs a Canadian the best part of $30. When I was at Dearborn, not only did I have to pay the exchanges, but I had to pay a membership. And if you're only there for 2 or 3 nights, that really raises the fees. Now, I'm not begrudging these organizations for charging the fees. I'm only saying that from our standpoint, it makes it expensive. The other thing I've noticed too is a lot of these historical places, I suppose because they don't get a lot of funding, I don't know, but you go to a plantation home or whatever, and it's $20 or $30 easily, sometimes more. And so if you're going to these places, and if you do 10 of those or 15 of those in a trip like that, if that's what you're doing, that's a fair bit of money. It adds up, and that's without buying anything. That's just being there. But Americans keep their history very well, and some of those sites are actually really beautiful, and I guess if you look at it in the value added, it's pretty amazing. I always love being in the presence of where things actually happened instead of, a recreation of it. So we did a number of family visits, and again, that was great, 100 kilometers this way, 200 kilometers that way, all through southern Ontario, and we look forward to doing more of that type of thing next year as well. And then I mentioned already the Emily Park trip. The one trip that I have to still make some videos from is the trip I did to Ferris Provincial Park out in Campbellford. That's a very nice park too, and I enjoyed myself there very much, cycling and hiking and so on. And I'm probably going to put some videos together for that one. That was done in July or August, I guess, and I just hadn't had a chance to do that one, so I'm hoping maybe to put that one together as well, like I did for Emily Park. It was a nice day. And then a trip that we did in September, which was really nice, is Nadine and I decided we would go to Hershey, Pennsylvania, to the big RV show. It's the only chance that we can get to see some types of RVs in quantity down there that you really can't reasonably see here in Ontario. And so we went and did that and really enjoyed ourselves and met some wonderful people. I'm convinced that if we do, whether we do full-timing or part-timing or long-timing RVing when we retire, we're going to meet some wonderful people, make some great friends. I just really get a sense that the community of the RV community is the kind of people that I'd like to spend time with. And so I'm looking forward maybe to seeing how that plays out. And that's pretty much what happened in 2018. 2019, I think short of getting the generator completely configured, putting the soundproofing on it or whatever ultimately that I do with that and that kind of thing, I think we're short of failures and so on. I think we're pretty much where we want to be now. And it's just a matter of the trips we take and where we tend to go. I could see us end up going to Ottawa. I could see us going. I want to do some more backcountry trips. The last one I've done was when we went with a friend to Lake Superior Park in 2015, which was a great trip as well. But it's been a while since I've gone on that type of a trip where I just go to a wilderness site and explore. There's a number of parks around the North Bay area, Sudbury area, that I'd like to do that. It's just a matter of how much time I have and how I can figure out the costs and so on. With the generator, of course, I no longer need power, but Ontario Parks has pretty stringent regulations on noise. So I'm hoping with my silencing system that we may well end up with a quieter generator that would then make make it so that it's not irritating to the folks, and hopefully that makes everybody happy, especially if we have to run air. If we don't have to run air, I don't really worry too much. The batteries are going to give me a fair bit. I'll just need it if I'm running a toaster or a grill or something to that effect, and we'll just have to see what the rules are and what's possible and how that goes, and what people are how that can play. I also want to look into some boondocking camp opportunities here in Ontario where we can camp for free. Like I said, those are pretty limited. There's it's not just if it's Crown land, but then there's kind of the, well, yes, but this is Crown land, yes, of course, but we don't really camp here kind of thing. And so I have to just kind of see if that works in a way that makes one feel comfortable or not. So I'll have to just see what, how that goes. But the idea of BLM type land that the Americans have, especially in the Southwest, that's pretty uncommon up here. And maybe in the north there's a bit more of it, but it's far less so than than you get in America. So anyhow, next year I'm hoping that we can travel and that we can find clever ways to save a little bit of money on some of those types of costs, as this RV can pretty much stand on its own 2 feet now for a number of days. I would say with the generator, we've eliminated the constraint of electricity, which with only 2 batteries was going to last me maybe 2 days, maybe. It's pretty, the parasitic draws on this vehicle are enough that you're going to burn through that battery in a couple of days or so, no matter what. So with that being done, then you have, of course, I guess the next major constraint would be water. So we'd have to see, but I would imagine if I'm hiking and camping, I come back every night, I'm going to want to have a shower because you're pretty grungy. We have the toilet and whatever, so we'll have to see. But to me, I would think that one person, I would say that you're looking at about 8-person days. So with 2 people, 4 days or so, you're pretty much done. And with 1 person, maybe you can get a week out of it. So we'll have to see. But it'd be fun to experiment with it. And again, even if you have to reposition after a week to go dump and stuff, you're pretty good shape. And if I find that I can do that regularly, you can certainly get a membership with Ontario Parks for, say, $150. Because you can go into a park right now and dumping costs you maybe $15 or $20. So, you do it 10 times, you're all set. But there may be other options where you can dump, for less money and and just have to investigate and just see, you know, how to plan that out a bit so I know in advance where to do that. So anyhow, so that's what I'm hoping 2019, in knock on wood, is going to be a lot more to do with traveling and enjoying more than fixing and adjusting. And I'm really hoping that, you know, there's a lot less of that, which will save some money, of course, but it will also, and time on my part, but will also allow us to do the other things. Anyhow, I just want to say to all of the people who've been following this channel mostly recently, thank you so much for watching. It's wonderful. If you enjoy my stories, please subscribe or give me a like. And I look forward to doing more and telling you about my RVing with Henry. Thank you very much.